Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this last in our 2019 series of Distinguished Speaker Talks. My name is Stu McKenzie. I serve as Science Manager with the Criminal Investigations and Network Analysis, or CINA Center, here at George Mason University. Don't despair, we have a great spring lineup planned for you. We're going to have a series of talks that include topics like human trafficking, mapping illicit drug networks, and we'll start off on February 20th with a talk by Dr. Chris Coper from GMU's Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy. He'll address the disturbing topic of mass shootings. If you'd like to be kept informed about these and other upcoming CINA events, don't forget to sign in on the sheet, those of you in the room. If you're joining us remotely or if you're watching this later, shoot us an email. We'll be very happy to keep you in the loop. This afternoon, however, it's a great honor to introduce to you Dr. David Maimon. David holds a PhD in sociology from the Ohio State University, and he serves as an associate professor of criminology and criminal justice at Georgia State. His award-winning research covers topics like cybersecurity, cybercrime, fraud, computer hacking, network security, and he's also the founder of the evidence-based crime, cybersecurity research group, also at Georgia State. David's generously serving as a co-PI on a CINA-funded initiative into darknet investigations, and he's going to talk a little bit about his recent work for us this afternoon in that area, including some results of a recent collaboration that are never before seen, so we're very excited about that. Please join me in welcoming Dr. David Maimon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Stu, for the really nice introduction. You know, every time people talking about Ohio State and then say the Ohio State, I mean, that's the right way to say it, right? So thank you, I appreciate that. I'm really excited to be here, guys, because you know, one main reason, and that is that finally I got a green light to discuss some of the findings I've been dying to discuss during the last 2 months about an expedition we had in the darknet during the last 10 months, and so finally I got cleared to talk about those findings. This is an exciting opportunity. To discuss them, to discuss those findings, and of course, being here in George Mason is awesome. I was a professor in the University of Maryland for 8 years, lobbying everybody I know in George Mason to allow me to come here and talk to you guys, and it never worked, so I had to go to Atlanta in order to do that. So in briefly and in one sentence, what I'm going to do here today is essentially talk about evidence-based cybersecurity. Tell you what the approach is all about, and then give a few examples around the way that we believe evidence-based cybersecurity could lead, guide law enforcement agencies' operation in cyberspace. Okay? And maybe before I do that, I should give some background with respect to where sort of the idea for evidence-based cybersecurity it came from. So I assume that folks sitting in this room are familiar with the devastating crime problem we had here during the 70s until the 90s. Right? I mean, so during that time, crime rates, especially violent crime rates, were increasing dramatically. And police departments across the nation tried to find a way to reduce that trend. And so they tried many things, including deploying police officers, more police officers all over our streets. It didn't really work. Then police departments across the nation decided that maybe what needs to be done is shorten the response time to calls from citizens. It didn't really work either. And so, a frustration began to emerge, right? Because, folks started thinking that whatever the police is doing isn't really working, right, for reducing crime. During that time, police forces across the nation decided that they need to be more innovative, right, with the approaches that they take in effort to reduce crime. And so they started talking to social scientists. And one of the major social scientists they talked to sit here in George Mason, as you guys know, David Weisberg. And together with him and Larry Sherman, which is another very prominent criminologist, they tried to work out, solutions, right, to this issue. So during the 80s and I would say mid-80s to 90s, we see Sherman and Weisberg running many analysis, running many studies in different states across the United States. And one of the interesting findings that they were able to report was that of a hotspot of crime. So hotspot of crime, for those who are not familiar with the term, and I assume that in the context of George Mason, everybody knows what hotspot is. It essentially are street segments, blocks that produce high levels of crime, right? And the interesting findings during the 80s, it was 89, I think, that Sherman and Weisberg reported that finding, was that in Minnesota, 5% of the street segments produced more than 50% of police calls. To the police, right? And they were able to replicate, I mean, this finding was replicated over and over again here in the United States, as well as, in Israel and other countries around the globe. And this essentially what became to be known as hotspot of crime, right? Small street segments, or not small, but street segments, a small number of street segments that produce a relatively high level of crime. So based on this finding, what Weisberg and Sherman decided to propose was to essentially focus more police attention, more police efforts in these hotspots of crime. Okay, so instead of deploying police officers all over and expecting that crime will be reduced, let's focus police officers and police attention into those hotspots of crime. And so what they did in Minnesota, again, they took I think more than 100 street segments. They randomly assigned them to control and treatment. In the control street segments, they did nothing. In the treatment, they deployed more police officers. And what these scholars were able to find that once you deploy more police forces in those hotspots of crime, crime is reduced, as you guys can see in this figure, more dramatically, right, than in the control group. Okay, so that has become to be known as hotspot policing, right? Essentially what we do, we focus attention in those hotspots of crime in order to reduce crime. And that is what many criminologists believe is one of the reasons for this shift, right, in crime trends starting the 90s, right? This is not the only reason. I know that some of my criminologist friends will not like me to say that, but it's in a recent review I've read, folks believe that between 8 to 10% of the reduction, the decrease that you guys see here in crime rates in the United States, in violent crime in the United States, is attributed to hotspot policing, okay? What does this show us? Well, in my opinion, it shows us that Guardian's openness to innovation, together with close collaboration with social scientists, could prove useful in combating street crime. Okay? Now let's fast forward 40 years, and it seems like we're experiencing a very similar problem to that we experienced 40 years ago in the context of street crime, this time in cyberspace. Unfortunately, I can't really give you accurate assessment with respect to how much cybercrime we have in our society because we have no official portal, no official organization collecting data on that. But what we do have is the Internet Crime Complaint Center reports, their annual reports for citizens submitting their complaints on cybercrime incidents that they experienced. And what we see is that between 2017 and 2018, there's a huge increase in the volume of losses for different types of cybercrime here in the United States, from $1.4 billion to $2.7 billion. Right? That's a lot of money that folks are reporting to lose in cyberspace for different types of crime. IC3 is interesting because at the end of the day, they're not really collecting reports from large corporations on data breaches. What you see here is essentially folks complaining about online fraud, which is interesting, right? I mean, again, what you see here is not the whole complete picture of the volume of losses that we have here in the United States for different types of cybercrime. So seeing this figure and this graph, it comes, I assume, as no surprise to folks sitting in this room and watching us at home or at their offices, that Americans nowadays are more worried about cybercrime or becoming the victim of cybercrime than any other type of crime. Right? Street crime, terrorism, cybercrime is the #1 fear in our country. And so to this environment, we see a lot of security companies chiming in and proposing to help us, right? And this is just some of the companies, some of the dimensions that cybersecurity companies try to sort of address. I won't be talking a whole lot about those companies, but at the same time, we have law enforcement agencies really trying to help us as citizens to be more secure in cyberspace. And the way they're doing this, when I think about their effort, I think that there are three major ways through which folks in law enforcement agencies try to sort of protect us all. A, by finding criminals, running investigations, and indict them. And if that will work, this is an example for that. I mean, the FBI, the Secret Service, they run investigation on cybercrime incidents, find people even outside of the country, and bring them to justice. Another interesting way that law enforcement agencies work in the context of cybercrime is by running sting operations, right? So The Lure is one of my favorite books by Steve here. He's talking about a sting operation that the FBI has put together when they lured two Russian hackers to come here to the United States and then capture them, threw them to prison. Another way law enforcement agencies are heavily sort of involved in order to sort of improve or sort of make cyberspace more secure is by running sting operation and take over existing darknet markets. Right? These are the three major ways that law enforcement sort of run their operation in cyberspace. And the question is whether it really works. Right? Does it really reduce cybercrime? And, like this old guy, right, I'm afraid that, I don't know. I mean, we really don't know whether the cybersecurity efforts, the cybersecurity companies' efforts, as well as law enforcement efforts in cyberspace, really produce meaningful reduction in cybercrime. That, in my opinion, suggests that what needs to be happening is more and more scientists chiming in and help produce more information regarding the effectiveness of the products that the cybersecurity companies are producing, whether they're really effective in preventing different types of cybercrime, as well as test the effectiveness of existing law enforcement efforts in reducing cybercrime in our society, and really making cyberspace more secure. And this is what evidence-based cybersecurity is all about. Okay? Evidence-based cybersecurity is essentially an approach calling for moving beyond decision makers' political, financial, social background, and personal experience into a model which tools adoptions, policy enforcements, those decisions are made based on scientific studies findings. And that's what we hope to bring into the picture. The evidence-based cybersecurity approach is focused on the human. We bring technology in, and I think that's a key thing, and that's what sort of differentiates us from other groups, right? I mean, you have many groups that study cybercrime. Most of the groups out there are either very technical or very human-based. We bring both. We believe that it's important to collect data from the key actors that sort of allow this phenomena to happen. The offenders, the enablers, the guardians and targets in the field. We need to run experiments with these guys. We need to really understand how they work in the field in order for us to be able to generate data that will allow decision makers to make some conscious decisions with respect to the implementation, the deployment of tools and policies. We call for adoption of rigorous scientific research design. And in my mind, rigorous scientific research design include experiments. Again, experiments are the golden standards of scientific research, as I assume folks know here. So field experiments are awesome. We also run we can't really run natural experiments. You can study natural experiments, right? But experiments are great. Surveys, but unlike other folks, our surveys are not really questionnaires only. So you can get a lot of observation from existing tools like intrusion detection systems and firewall and antivirus. Those will produce logs that will allow you to design some kind of a survey research methodology around them. And of course, observations, right? I mean, we need to make sure that we engage in rigorous observations about enablers, about offenders, about our guardians during their operations. So that's what we are trying to do. We have three key principles to our approach. What we're trying to do is we're trying to identify online threats and vulnerabilities and educate targets of cybercrime. We hope to guide policy development and guardian efforts to secure cyberspace. And then finally, and equally important, we hope to guide the design and configuration of computer environments that can mitigate the consequence of cybercrime to victims. Now, we have many projects around each of those key principles. Today, we will focus on the relevance of our approach in the context of guiding policy development and law enforcement efforts in cyberspace. So the first example I will give comes from a project that CINA graciously funded, and that is our operation on the darknet. So maybe before we talk about the project, let's just start thinking about the way law enforcement agencies are working with the darknet at the moment. As I have mentioned already, the key operation that law enforcement agencies are involved in the context of darknet is essentially trying to take out websites, right? All those markets on which people advertise their commodities, sell and buy those illegal commodities. So every now and then we'll see the FBI launches a release saying we were able to take this website off, right, or that website down. This is really important, right? And again, I can't really tell you it's effective or not. But one of the key things we need to understand is that this approach, at least theoretically, is very limited. Because if you think about what the feds are doing when they take off a market, they essentially take out the server, right? And so people can no longer access the server and so interact with the server and sell and buy whatever they want. And once they do that, essentially, they take a server that is supporting the client-server model. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the client-server model. In the client-server model, there's one server to which each and every one of us, when we sort of try to access information, go to, and that server produces that information for you, right? So if you go to Google your name, you go to Google server, and then Google is the only server that produces this information for you back on your computer screen. And if you think about the darknet, and if you think about the online dark markets that are out there, that's essentially the model that the criminals are using, right? There's one server, one admin or several admins that maintain the server, and that allows posts to be posted on the server with respect to commodities, illegal commodities, as well as the sale. And so when the feds take the server down, nobody can access the server. Tell you what, though, those criminals are smart. And so they're moving into a different type of communication, and that is the peer-to-peer communication, which you see right here. I'm not going to ask how many of you are familiar with Kazaa and LimeWire, not because I don't want to, I just don't want to, and I don't want to know how old I am, right? Because Kazaa was very popular when I was, when I was using it. But as I assume folks know, the peer-to-peer model is a completely different communication model that essentially requires you to download the software to your computer, and then you're sort of connecting to a network and allow everybody on the network to access your computer as well. So what we see nowadays is that the criminal adopted this communication model, and we see more and more markets that take this communication model instead of the client-server model. Open Bazaar is one of those markets that we've discovered recently. You need to download the software, you need to start talking to people, and this is how you increase the increase the network, expand your network, and are able to buy more and more illegal and legal commodities as well. So this is one area that if the feds will try to take a server down, they will not be able, right? Because everybody, right, has access to everybody's computer. So taking down a server will not work in the context of peer-to-peer. Another reason why we believe that this approach that the feds take in taking down server is not really effective is that we see many criminals move into WhatsApp, Jabber, Telegram, those communication channels that are one-on-one, and they simply open groups there, right? And so if you take down the market, you're not really addressing these guys that sell everything, right? That you can imagine and that you can find on the darknet on those channels, right? So we believe that something needs to happen, right? And a different course of action needs to be taken in order to sort of improve law enforcement operation in cyberspace. And so what we believe needs to be done is that we need to be able to collect open source intelligence on those stolen markets, on those platforms that allows stolen data to be sold from the peer-to-peer, the Telegram, the WhatsApp, as well as the usual client-server models that support this entire operation. And so the project that CINA is sponsoring essentially allows us to collect this intelligence on a weekly basis, and that is huge, right? Because advertisements are posted on those websites on a weekly basis. So we collect this information on a weekly basis from from around 60 markets with the goal of really trying to identify trends of new types of crimes. We are trying to build the criminal trajectories of vendors and clients, because again, we follow these guys throughout time, right? So every week we see new vendors, new customers, right, joining the market. And then once we have all this information, we can map the ecosystem and try to come up with innovative ways to try and disrupt them, right? It will not be taking down servers, but it will be injecting intervention that will potentially disrupt the whole market and hopefully dissolve the whole network, okay? I don't know if you guys had any exposure to darknet markets and some of the ads that are out there. We tend to focus less on drugs. We are more interested in digital goods and frauds. And these are some of the advertisements that we find on a weekly basis. We talked about this yesterday in Tony's office. So U.S. citizenship for $25,000. If anyone wants a hookup, I can help you there. Driving licenses with matching social security number, you can get those for 99 euros. Of course, bank information, everybody knows that you can get those. Fake dollars, so you can get $20,000, fake dollars for 800. You can get forged Blue Cross Blue Shield healthcare card, and you can get a lot of really, really, really interesting stuff, right? That we keep finding, right, on a weekly basis, and folks aren't not aware of it, right, because they scrape once a year or once a month, and they don't see the new type of commodities that is available out there. Bank cards, so fools and dumps, these are things that many professors and cybercrime scholars show all the time. We're interested in software and malware. My interest is in hacking, and I want to see the tools that these guys are using. So we keep tracking those as well. We keep tracking hackers who offers hacking services. Ransomware is big, right? As folks know here, many police departments, many financial institutions, some cities as well got hit by ransomware, and you can buy ransomware, right, online and just start disseminating it. At least that's what they say, right? So it's really fun for me. It's really fun. We have this Friday meeting with all our students. We have a fairly large group of students sitting on a weekly basis and simply report, right, the new advertisement, the new trends. What is it that they were able to find this week on each of those markets that we sit in. It's cool because it allows you to generate graphs, cool graphs that tells you how many new ads are on each market, and these are just 3 of the markets that we have, how many new vendors the student found. And it also allows you, as I indicated earlier, to identify new trends. And this is the exciting part of the presentation today, because this is where I'm going to share with you for the first time what we were able to do and some of the purchases we made on those darknets. So because we collect data on a weekly basis, we can run those really interesting and cool plots that tells us what's hot right now and what's not, right? So this is a visualization that we ran taking keywords from 20 markets, 20 of the markets that we sit in, just trying to understand, the trend. What is it that is really hot? There's a lot of interesting things here, but the key things that I want you guys to take is that USA, right, is one of the major targets of frauds here in the darknet. Then you see the UK, and in the corner, Canada. And as hopefully you guys understand, the larger the word is, the more mentions it gets in those 20 darknets, right? So we run those analysis, trying to figure out what's hot right now, and also try to find some emerging trends, right? And one of the emerging trend we were able to find earlier, actually in 2018, was that of people selling TLS certificate. Okay, we were able to find at least 5 markets on which vendors offered to sell TLS certificates. Now, I know it doesn't really mean anything to folks sitting here, but so let me explain what TLS certificates are all about. So TLS certificates they have two major functions. First, they aim to help us authenticate and verify that the identity of a host is really the true identity of the host. And second, they support the encryption of information data coming from a server you're trying to access to your computer. Okay? To simplify things even more, the green bar, right, that you see on the URL, that is essentially an indication that the website is encrypted with a TLS certificate. Okay? This is just a visualization that allows you to understand the contribution, right, of TLS certificate for information traveling over the internet. If you go on a regular HTTP, which again, not too many servers essentially allow you to connect to them using HTTP, that essentially means that anyone along the way can get your information. So again, we talked about the client-server model. The client-server model is essentially you sending a query to Google or whatever, and then Google send you this information back, right? In HTTP communication form, everybody, hacker, NSA, the police, internet service providers, can see everything that you're communicating with the server and what the server is sending you back, fairly easily. With HTTPS, key information, which is the user, your passwords if you're sending, as well as the data you send, is encrypted. So people, organization, cannot really see that information, moving along, the way, along the line, right, along the internet. Hopefully that makes sense. And the TLS certificates are important because essentially they allow that encryption. Now, who's responsible for producing those certificates? Well, certificate authorities. Certificate authorities, we have major corporations here in the United States and around the globe, are charged with the task of employing various validation process for different types of SSL and TLS certificates. Okay? And so, essentially what needs to be happening if you're Bank of America or if you're George Mason and you want people to be able to pay you online without any issue, you need to apply for one of those certificate authorities in order for them to give you the TLS certificate. You buy those certificates, right? And the certificate authorities needs to employ validation. That if you're George Mason, right, and you want your students to pay online, we need to make sure that you are George Mason and you're not this thief, right, that says is George Mason. And so they have different level of validation: DV, OV, and EV. DV is the standard one. It's free. You don't need to provide too much. You just need to show that you have a domain name. OV, the certificate authorities verify that you are the organization, and EV is the highest level of validation that the certificate authorities will make you go through, that essentially will prove that you are who you say you are. This is the process that you need to go through, right, in order to get the EV certificate. You need to apply online. You need to make sure that your organization is authenticated. You need to make sure that you submit all those documents. You need to provide a physical address, telephone number. They need to call you. They need to see that the organization actually exists and that your server is hosted in a specific place. They will call you, and only then they will issue the EV certificate. And essentially, this would look like this. You're going to get the green bar. Well, it depends on the browser, right? I mean, I think Chrome no longer presents the green bar, just the black bar. But then it will give the user indication that he's on Bank of America server, in this case, and that the server and that the organization is situated in the United States. Okay? EV certificates cost money, a lot of money, right? And those large corporations, they pay a lot of money because they want to increase trust among their users, right? You want to make sure that folks feel comfortable paying, that their information will not be sold. This is just 4 major CA, certificate authorities, that charge you money for EV certificate and then give you money. And again, the reason why EV certificates are important is that we see more and more criminals, online criminals, I should say, sending you phishing emails with a link embedded saying you need to pay this, you need to do that, you need to change passport, and so on and so forth. And they simply desire, right, those certificates, because if they send you the link without a certificate, and they will forward your traffic to a server that doesn't have a certificate, most likely you're going to get this message, right, from Google saying, it's the connection is not secure. You may want to avoid connected. And that is a red flag. And so what the bad guys want, they want those certificates, right, because they want to increase the volume of targets in order for them to be able to build a website like this one, PayPal, right, which is not really PayPal, but it has the green bar, right? And so the TLS certificates are important for these guys. And so in 2018, the end of 2018, we're able to find this market. And these are some of the advertisement of vendors selling those TLS certificates, right? And this is something we discussed already in the first report in 2019. I'm sorry. In January, we released this report showing these advertisement of vendors on the dark net and on the clear net as well, offering to build a website for you, a phishing website, with a TLS certificate. These are really cool advertisements that we're able to find also on the darknet that essentially gives you the certificate only. Right? So you see there's a difference between selling you the website with the TLS certificate and selling you the TLS certificate only. So we were able to find this guy selling TLS certificate for USA-based companies. The commodity, sort of speaking, or whatever you're going to get from this guy is the TLS certificate as well as documents validating that your company actually exists, right? And if you look at the description here, he says that he will get you the certificates from the certificate authorities, right? Which is really, really interesting. I mean, so he's not fake. He's saying he's not faking anything. He's telling you, I'm going to give you those certificates from the legitimate authorities. So when you look at the TLS certificate, you see a certificate from, the legitimate certificate authority. So, we were able to find this guy selling in USA. He's selling Australian TLS certificates. UK, we know that he's selling Russian certificates. He's selling TLS certificates for Hong Kong. So, this guy says that he knows what he's doing. So it was really interesting because, again, we were puzzled, right, with respect to the way that these guys actually get those certificates. How do they do that, right? And the only way to do that is to actually purchase them. And so we did. And so if you remember, we had 2 types of vendors out there, right? We have those vendors who offer to build a website for you with a TLS certificate, and then this guy, or these guys, that offers to give you the TLS certificate itself, right? So we first approached the guy who said that he's going to design a website for you and give you the TLS certificate. We pay him. I can't say exactly how much he paid because I'm worried and I have a family and kids, and so we need to make sure that all that information is vague. But we pay this guy between $100 and $500, right, to design the website. This is the website the guy designed for us. We wanted to make sure that people can log in, can pay us, right, because again, it's a phishing site, with the goal of getting the TLS certificate. The guy came back to us 2 weeks after with the website, no TLS certificate. We confronted the guy, and then he wanted some more money. We gave them more money, but then he disappeared, right? So this guy obviously cannot deliver, right? And we say, okay, these guys who build websites for you will not be able to give you the TLS certificate. How about the guy who says that he can give you those certificates? We contact the guy, and we immediately realized that this guy will not design a website. We need to design our own website. So we designed this bank, right? Again, because I'm worried for my safety and my family's, I will not show you, everything on the website. But this is how the website looks like. It's a bank that we opened. I really like this, right? Because again, the whole point. This is a phishing website, right? We approached the guy and we told him that we need a TLS certificate for this website, and so the guy says, no worries, just send me the money. And we negotiated. I'm not going to say exactly how much we paid. We paid for this one an amount of between $5,000 to $10,000. Okay, so this one is way more expensive. Okay, we sent an installment, one of the installment, and then we wait and we sat and wait for the guy to contact us. 2 weeks after we sent the first installment, we got those certifications indicating that our bank is a real entity right now in the state of Delaware. Right? This is what you see here right now. Our official documentation that were produced by the state of Delaware. We got it on our email. Of course, some of the information here I can't really disclose. But if you go on Delaware website, and I'll give you the company name, the bank name, you'll be able to find us there. Okay? I hope I don't need to pay taxes for my company, right? But anyhow. So we got those official documentations. The guy takes those official documentation, and then he opens a DUNS number as well. DUNS number is important because it's essentially one of those companies that validate that your business is real. They give you a DUNS number, and so you can verify that you're making business, you're doing business with the right person. Again, I can't really disclose the company name, but if you go on Duns and Bradstreet website, you'll be able to find my company there. The guy take those documents, ask for the next installment. We send the next installment because this guy just did something really interesting, and he submit those documentation along with other documentation that I can't really disclose to the certificate authority. And the certificate authority received those documentation because we received an email from the certificate authority, which I can't really discuss, essentially approving their request. If you go on my website, the website is live, you'll be able to see that we were able to get the TLS certificate, right? And again, if you go back to my discussion earlier about extensive validation certificate and what needs to happen in order for me to get this, I just got an EV certificate for an organization that doesn't really exist, right? And I didn't do it myself. There was a group of people in the darknet doing it, using the government services, defrauding certificate authorities folks in order to get the certificates and then install it on their website. Okay, this is a huge finding, in my opinion. And folks around the industry and government agree, and so we're trying to figure out a way, to actually handle this issue. Okay, so this is really interesting, by the way, because if you think about what the certificate authority needs to do in order to validate me, they need to look at the address where my organization, I say that the organization exists. I don't know I wasn't aware of the address. The vendor came up with the address himself. And when we Googled the address he provided for the certificate authority, as well as for the legal authorities in Delaware and in Dunn and Bradstreet, when you simply Google it, Google Map, this is the location. It's this house. It doesn't look deserted, but it doesn't look like a bank either. That's not a bank. Okay. So as you guys can see, this scraping thing that we do on a weekly basis is really cool in identifying trends of crimes that emerge, and then trying to make sense out of them, and then potentially come up with a way to address them using legislation or using sort of enforcement efforts. The other thing that we believe that the scraping thing and the data collection that we engage in is good for is for really trying to understand how we can disrupt markets, right? Because if you think about what we do, at the end of the day, we have the list of vendors, the list of customers on a weekly basis, the communication between them. I assume that folks understand here that the customers, once they purchase, they have the opportunity to leave a review, as well as how much money they spend with the customer. So based on that, we can build the social network, the interaction between customer and vendor, as well as between vendors themselves. That's what we try to do in this plot. And it also allows us to try and assess how much money the vendors are making on a daily, weekly basis, monthly basis, annual basis, and so on. Right? This is what you see here. We see a plot describing the revenue this one guy did over, I can't remember which market is that, but it's just one market. Okay? The question is, as I indicated earlier, can we do something in order to disrupt the daily revenue? Can we inject an intervention that will reduce the volume of people actually consuming stuff from the website, right? We believe we can, and we can give you an amazing example for a natural experiment that it turned out that we have in our data. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Silk Road version 3, right? So it's no longer 1, 2, it's 3. It's a relatively small market that is active. Last month, or 2 months ago, I can't remember, I think it was in August, 2 of the admins started fighting with each other. Right? And their fight, was posted, right, on several platforms. So this guy is saying that he can't really trust the admin, and then you see some customer responses to this feud, right, to this exchange of words between the admin. So what we thought will be really interesting to do is to see how this fight really influenced the daily revenue, the number of vendors, the number of ads that are posted on Silk Road before and after. Right? So again, these are some of the customer responses, and these are some of the interesting findings that I would like to report to you guys. Again, this is very preliminary, but I think it's still really interesting. As you guys can see in this figure, the average number of active vendors before and after this fight has been reduced dramatically, right? From a little over 5 to a little over 2, right, before and after. As you guys can see in this figure, we also show you, the daily number of active vendors a month before and a month after, right? During this time, the website was shut down because of the fight between these two guys, but then 2 weeks after, it went up again. As you guys can see, there's a considerable difference between the average number of active vendors before and after the fight, right? There's also a significant difference between the average number of new advertisements we were able to get before and after this fight. How about the number of transactions, right? The number of transactions we were able to identify over Silk Road. As you guys can see in these two figures, again, the number of transactions has dropped significantly between, before the fight and after the fight. And then this is the interesting plot in my mind, the daily revenue. Right? So as I mentioned earlier, after you purchase something online, on Silk Road or many of the other darknet, you can leave a comment as well as how much money you actually spent with the vendor. So what we did was we tried to compare the average amount of money folks spend and sort of say they spent before the fight and after the fight. And as you guys can see, the revenue that these guys made on a daily basis, on average, dropped significantly from a little over $1,000 to a little over $600, right? So and then again, you see the complete trend, in this figure. So this is important because it clearly suggests that we can do things, right, in order to really disrupt those markets. And one of the things we can do is to maybe incite fights, right, between customers and vendors. That will definitely, based on what we see here in the natural experiment, it has the potential, right, of disrupting the market. The last thing that I would like to sort of discuss in the context of what we were trying to do with the evidence-based cybersecurity approach, and that is not really related to our darknet operation, well, somehow related, is that we believe that our approach could also be effective in guiding new policies, right, that are designated towards sort of tackling online criminals, right, and hackers specifically. I don't know if you guys know, but website defacement is fairly huge among script kiddies. Script kiddies are the new hackers, the low-level hackers who are not very skilled and they're trying to make themselves a name. And so what they do in order to make themselves a name is they hack websites, right? So hacking a website will be something like what I'm presenting here. If somebody would have taken over my presentation and simply changed the content to present their own ideology, right? I mean, the low-level hackers, the script kiddies, love to do that because it's fairly easy to do that, A, and B, it helps them get a reputation among their peers, right? And once you have higher reputation, you can get access to more prestigious people. You can buy tools in more sophisticated and prestigious darknet markets and so on, right? So one of the things that these hackers do, those script level, those script kiddies, those low-level hackers do after they hack a website is they tell the world about it, right? Again, unlike hacking Bank of America or Chase or George Mason University, where we don't really want people to know about your operation, when you hack a website, you want everyone to know about that. And in order to increase exposure, what these guys do is they report their hacking activities into a website called ZoneAge. Okay, zoneage.org, you guys all can access it from your computer. It's on the ClearNet. This is the interface, the homepage of the website. But if you start going to Archive and Archive Plus, you'll be able to see a list of hackers notifying the hacking activity, the website they deface, the time, and again, this website is updated on a daily basis, and you can get attacks pretty much on an hour basis, right? So you can get the alias of the hacker, you can get the domain name of the website that they hacked, as well as if you click on the mirror, you'll be able to see how the defaced website looked like after the hacker's sort of operation on it. We think it's a valuable database for us to use because at the end of the day, we believe that we can use the information these hackers post on ZoneAge to simply contact them and potentially deter them, right, and nudge them away from becoming black hat hackers. Black hat hackers are the malicious hackers. We want to nudge them away to be from being black hat to white hat, sort of work with my team, right? So let me give you an example. So Santi Boy, for instance, we looked online. We tried to figure out, whether we can find him on different social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter. We were able to find this guy on Facebook. This is Santi Boy. This is the Facebook, right, account of Santi Boy. Then, of course, we're interested in finding these guys on the darknet, right? Because we believe that, the more sophisticated you get, the more likely you will to establish presence on the darknet as well. So we're looking for information on these guys on the darknet, and this guy, Pond here, is also, we're also able to find him on the darknet. We also find these guys on Telegram and WhatsApp, right? Which is really cool, because once you find them, you can start communicating with these guys. So Error Squad right here, this is their Telegram, Telegram page. So you can just start communicating with these guys. So what we decided to do is, we said we have a way to interact with these guys. Let's see if we can nudge them away from generating attacks on any website, right? And so what we did was on Facebook, we created this Facebook page. We looked at, we have been scraping Zone H during the last 3 years. And so we have and we continue doing this on a weekly basis. So we have a very large group of names we can contact. We looked at the hackers who generated attacks during the last 6 months only. And we tried to find their presence on Facebook. We were able to find 120 hackers on Facebook. And once we find these hackers, we randomly assign them to 2 groups, control and treatment. I'm all about experiments. The control group, we simply looked at their activity, right? We tried to figure out whether they will get engaged in hacks in the future or not. The treatment group got the following message from us on their Facebook. This is, well, maybe I shouldn't have this name here. This is the hacker name. We wanted to let you know that the federal authorities raided our house with a search warrant today. And because they believe I knocked down this website that this guy actually knocked down. Okay. They said punishment could range between 1 to 5 years in prison. You may want to lay low in the next week or so. Okay. So again, 60 control, 60 treatment. We have Zone H and their reports on Zone H. We try to figure out what happened before and after. This is what happens before and after. So on the control group, the difference between the volume of website defacement attacks that the control and treatment group produced before we sent the message was relatively similar. This is how it looks like after. Right? A week after, right? So again, we look at the week before and the week after. Now, we were also interested in seeing whether this trend continues and whether there is a decay to the deterrent. Remember, we asked the guy to lay low for a week, right? This is how the trends look like, right? So this difference is insignificant. It's 4 weeks before the intervention. As you guys can see here, non-significant differences between the groups, 4 weeks before. This is where the intervention happened. This is the significant difference I was just showing you. There are still differences here till at week 4, the 2 groups converge. Those differences in week 2 and 3 are insignificant, but there are still differences. Okay? So this is really cool because at the end of the day, it's an indication that you can nudge these guys away from producing attacks, right? Maybe they're not reporting. I'll give you that. But they're still, they're not gaining reputation if they're not reporting, right? So there's a loss there for them. There's a cost that they definitely take into consideration once you tip them with, law enforcement agencies, trying to get us, thinking it's them. This experiment, this project is an ongoing. Of course, we conduct more and more experiments. In the next phase, what we want to do, and we hope CINA will be able to support that operation as well. What we want to do is we actually want to host these guys on our websites, right? So what we did was we built those websites, bank websites, and what we hope to do is we hope to tip the hackers with vulnerabilities on the website. Once they're on the website, we want to scare them with a message. And we simply want to see how they will respond to it. Right? Whether that will influence the decision-making process throughout the progression of the hack, whether it will produce any significant effect on the volume of crimes that they're generating and reporting on Zone H, the severity of crimes. I think it'll be really interesting to explore that, as well as see how we can nudge website administrator to clean their website faster. Because if you remember what these guys are trying to do, they're trying to spread the word. about their capabilities. But if you're more likely to clean the website immediately after they hack, they're really getting no rewards from their attacks, right? So we believe that if we can help website administrator to do that, we will be able to again nudge the script kiddies away from generating those attacks. And this is again still work in progress. So just to conclude my talk today, I think that the evidence-based cybersecurity approach is a really interesting approach that heavily rely on rigorous scientific methods, or call for relying heavily on rigorous scientific research design in order to collect data, in order to experiment with different interventions, in order to make sure that we can guide law enforcement efforts, as well as public policy efforts in this really crazy space that we call cyberspace today. Thank you.